You're listening to Retail Soundbites.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kantar Retail Soundbites podcast for the week of January 19th, and Happy New Year. I'm Barry Thomas, our Senior Global Thought Leader, serving clients on global commerce, marketing, and future tense topics. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us, as always, on every show is my pod partner, Rachel Dalton.
Hi, everyone. And yes, echoing Barry's Happy New Year. Excited to kick off our first podcast of 2026. I'm the head of retail insights for the Americas at Kantar. And we are super hyped for the next year of awesome pods. As many of you know, our podcast is intended to share knowledge and insights on both North America and international retail and restaurant verticals. We kick off each podcast with a news and notes section to share innovative and impactful stories from the past 2 weeks. And then we introduce our Kantar experts or guest speakers to share insights on critical topics in commerce today.
Awesome, Rachel. Well, before we get into the news and notes, what's going on? How was your New Year's?
Oh, New Year's was great. Really just awesome holiday time in general. And so New Year's, we took it easy. We had a busy holiday. So my husband went out and bought, hats and fun, noisemakers, blowers, things for the kids to play with. And we just got great Chinese food, and we watched the ball drop at Times Square, and we're warm in our house. And it just was very relaxing, but celebratory at the same time. It was really nice to be home and with family.
I love that. That's awesome. What did we do? We were down in Jacksonville. I'm down here today again, and we had about 20 friends or so and their kids. It was kind of cool, senior citizens, kind of still ringing in the new year, Rachel, still happens. We can all still walk. Don't have any canes or walkers yet. And then, we had all our kids, which was kind of fun, a bunch of 20-year-olds around 20-ish. And they're all friends. They've grown up together. So super cool. And right here in the river. So the big letdown, though, was my boat didn't arrive, which that was neat. But we'll have it this week. We still made it a great week of it. And the boys had, we're all down here and everything. So all good, all good. And then before we jump to news and notes, you and I, we just kind of fresh back from NRF, maybe for each of us. What was your favorite moment at NRF for the week? And you were on stage too, in a big way.
Yeah. I mean, I loved everything about NRF. We've gone for many years now, and our podcast is dedicated to our insights and learnings from the National Retail Federation Conference. I'm always very grateful. I'm invited to speak and host fireside chats and talk about commerce. And this year had a chance to have a fireside chat with Denise Candela, who's the EVP for Walmart Fashion US. And they're doing so many amazing things. I already was on the app buying a couple more cute pieces to wear. So now I'm a convert, and they have a lot of style and really cool things they're doing at Walmart. So that was probably one of my favorite things, highlights. But I loved being with our team. That was like the biggest thing for me was our whole team came, Barry, like all of my team. And we had some nice dinners and great conversations together. So that was a big piece of the conference for me, for sure.
Well, you crushed it. I think you're one of the very top moderators, just so easy to talk to. Then you kicked it off with sort of a state of commerce, which I need some of those slides. I'll be using those.
Yes.
And it was fantastic, especially the Walmart slides. And your whole team was there just cheering you on. So I just thought it was fantastic. For me, I thought something that was a little different this year is I went to the Rethink Retail, sort of top retail voices.
Yes.
I guess I'm probably the oldest person there. But kind of a swing.
Congratulations, Barry! You were nominated as a retail expert, which is really cool. And I think this is the second or third year in a row that you got that award. So pretty
something
awesome.
Like that. They just leave me on it. I'm just grateful. And I do some AI stuff with them too. So but they threw a pretty swanky VIP event. It was quite nice. A+ event on that. And there were many old friends I saw. So that was really cool, right? Nice. And I just want to continue to help that group. And so anyway, I thought it was fantastic week for NRF and you and your team there. So it was all good, Rachel. Let's break down the news and notes. It's going to be about NRF largely. So my first sort of story and all of these stories are coming from my LinkedIn posts I did. Just very quickly, Rachel, like you, I thought the Walmart Google news was kind of the big headline there. Obviously partnering with their Universal Commerce Protocol. And wow, John Furner, what a statement! His quote: "We aren't just watching the shift." We're driving it. I just thought
Mhm.
that embodied everything about Walmart. They were so large and in charge on numerous stages and best in class for sure. And they just talked about how they're embedding, AI into the core shopping experience, both Walmart, especially Sam's, and obviously into Google's Gemini platform. And this isn't just about search getting better; it's about commerce moving upstream, up into the AI-led discovery area. And so for them, that's just more personalization, pricing, membership benefits, and local fulfillment, all for the betterment of their shoppers, orchestrated in the AI layer. That can be on many of their interfaces, app, site, et cetera, but now also with Google, just like OpenAI. So this is, obviously a shift from browsing to agent-led commerce, and Walmart is all in. I mean, I'm just so impressed with them. It's another buy year for me with Walmart. Buy them. That stock is just crushing it.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big theme for this year's NRF. There were so many sessions that were dedicated to the transformation that we're seeing right before our eyes with everything related to AI and agentic commerce. And yes, Walmart was certainly at the forefront. How cool to see the head of Google Alphabet and the leader of Walmart on stage together. I mean, just really just setting the direction for the future of retail. So that was pretty empowering. I agree, Barry. I liked that session. Was great. So I had a lot of favorite sessions, but I'll talk about this one. This one was called "Building the Defining Brands of the 21st Century," and it was with Emma Greed from Good American and Ben Francis from Gymshark. And gosh, I've listened to Emma Greed on another podcast. I really admire everything that she's built. So I was kind of fangirling a bit there. And Ben Francis, the head of Gymshark, and my 14-year-old son is a huge fan. Wears lots of Gymshark, is a big into the gym. So I was inspired. And Harley Finkelstein, of course, really cool person, leader of Shopify, an amazing moderator. So we learned, of course, agentic applications are driving demand. That was a big takeaway. Good American and Emma actually said they had a 14 times increase in orders from agentic applications, which is pretty massive. They are two of the first retailers to be live on agentic commerce platforms. And it's really just following the customer, right? Everybody is using these platforms, and so you need to be there as a retailer. And Gymshark was really cool too. Ben talked about how he was very, very specifically focused on his brand vision and strategy of "We Do Gym," and so that focus has really helped drive that business exponentially to where it is today. And then the other thing I got out of that from both Emma and Ben was leaning into the power of influencers. We know how impactful social commerce is and how influences are driving communities, and that has a direct impact on business. And this was really just reconfirmed. For Gymshark, their influencers do directly impact the business. They've been with the company a long time, and it really just driving home the importance of creating communities at scale, which was another theme of the discussion. So anyway, awesome session.
I love that. I think I was sitting with you watching that, and you were taking really good notes because we took pictures of it.
Yeah.
And I've been in their sort of flagship store over in London a couple of years ago, just blown away. And they're really crushing it, with influencers. They look at really, if you said, well, what's your big media plan? I think they're going to look at you and say, well, our consumers, and
Mm-hmm.
they go online and they leave reviews, and that's our media. Think about that. Who else can say that at that scale
Yeah.
like they are? So that was a really cool session. So I have to agree. Another session I was really impressed with, and I'm kind of partial to beverages, and
Mm-hmm.
so, but want to give a lot of credit to PepsiCo. Michael Del Pozo was up there, and gosh, I mean, his session was about being future fit with their growth strategy, and they are definitely reshaping that portfolio with speed at scale for modern health, for Maha, for the new food pyramid, for GLP-1. I mean, how many companies can really say that? I don't think that many, Rachel. You and I are working with them every day. PepsiCo is just way out in front on all of this. So I just think one, they are shifting decisively from reacting to consumer trends to predicting them. They talked a lot about becoming a predictive enterprise. In many ways, data, AI, and unparalleled foresight. Structurally positioned again for modern health, that portfolio and what they're doing. He covered it chapter and verse. I mean, it's certainly the newer snack brand challengers they've purchased, but also Poppy. And by the way, Poppy, he said with such confidence, is on its way toward being a multi-billion-dollar global brand across the world. Whoa! I mean, they're just scaling that, in the context of modern soda, modern health across all the continents. I don't know what to say. I mean, that's kind of a signal for a lot of other beverage companies to have a modern health portfolio for beverages, especially for soda. And then he just talked lastly about they are every day, like every single day that they wake up, they're thinking about the core portfolio and functional benefits, prebiotics, postbiotics, functional hydration, better for you formulas. They know the future of beverages is here in some respects, and the consumer wants taste and functionality. It's not really a trade off. They want both, and they're leading that. So Rachel, I was impressed with all of that.
Yes, me too, Barry. And I think, with you in this session as well. And PepsiCo's partnering, of course, with AWS on a lot of their big initiatives and doing so many advanced things at the forefront, as you said. I remember one of the things that he talked about was their digital twins program. And he had a stat that they realized like 20% efficiency gains at a Gatorade plant. And they're using digital twins to improve a lot of areas of their manufacturing. So, they're right on with the consumer trends around modern health, but behind the scenes too, advancing so much of their manufacturing. They're talking about autonomous delivery, all of these things. So it was a pretty jam-packed session.
High five.
So for me, the next session that, again, I loved a lot of them, but this was a really interesting one. This was called Retail Creators Culture That Converts. And it's moderated by Jill Manoff from Glossy and Modern Retail. And the panelists were Sarah Henry from Walmart and Ashley Shapiro from American Eagle and Noah Gonzalez from H&M. And really, really cool. More about content creators and influencers. The discussion was how creator content often outperforms traditional brand marketing. And influencers in some ways are more important, especially around like the area of discovery. And we know discovery on social drives in-store demand for sure. There was some discussion around, making sure your influencers have the freedom to talk freely. Sarah at Walmart said the early days of Walmart's influencer programs were maybe a bit too prescriptive, but now they're enabling influencers to really speak more organically. And they've seen a lot of success with that. H&M talked about their creators being embedded into every consumer touch point. Sarah at Walmart talked about creators widening their aperture as well. And also this idea of building communities beyond social. So like Substack and Reddit and things like that, Discord, for example. And so there was some talk around, yes, American Eagle just launched its own Substack. It's a hot topic for H&M. They talked a little bit about Pinterest resurrecting as another social media app brands are investing behind. So anyway, it was about, the importance of cultivating influencers and just your overall creator community. And that really should be your top priority, but at the same time, making sure your brands stay front and center of the conversation. So just another cool session, I thought.
Gosh, I wish I'd have made that session, but you got the notes. We got it in the recap. So
yeah.
God, it's a common theme. All right, my last story is you, Rachel. I felt like, goodness gracious. Let's talk about your session. Now, this is from my point of view. You know more than me, but we were so proud of you up there and with Denise and kind of sharing how basically Walmart apparel has just been reinvented, shifting from traditionally in my era, EDLP only to now built on relevance, credibility, style. And social credibility. So they're definitely targeting, as you were talking to her about, a younger, more female, higher income, multi-person household shopper. They're modernizing everything, the product, the experience, perception, They have some incredible strategic partnerships with style authorities and influencers. She talked a lot about these experiential fashion moments, pop-ups. I just thought those were really neat. And then they just go viral. It helps the entire store, and just the bolder advertising that they're doing. And so what does all that mean? The result is Walmart Fashion is winning. I mean, Rachel, wasn't that one of the key things? They are winning. I mean, from key consumer segments, maybe from another retailer, maybe in Minnesota that's losing share daily, they're picking it up, and they're taking additional share from some of the new e-commerce players. And so, and then she mentioned, because of what they've been able to do with owned label and building their own label within Softlines, that is providing data and capability and knowledge to help own label across the store. I thought that was a hidden point, but she kind of gave a nod to it, Rachel, and I just thought that was important too.
Yeah, I just loved meeting Denise. She was really fantastic, and I'm so impressed with everything Walmart's doing. As I said, with fashion, like, yes, I am a convert, and they're really looking to democratize style. They're really leaning more into fashion as fashion is, and just, yes, as you said, Barry, changing the perception of fashion at Walmart, and they're doing amazing things. I loved, as I was walking through one of their stores, looking at all of the different displays. I did love just the vibrancy. It drew you in, the QR codes to be able to link back to the brand and get more information. Just this whole sort of omni-channel connection, I think was really interesting, part of what they're doing as well.
Good job.
Thank you, Barry. Glad you were there to cheer me on. Always appreciate it. So, for me, the last piece of news and notes is I loved the Ralph Lauren session. That was one of the keynotes. So David Lauren from Ralph Lauren and a woman from Microsoft, who was also really, really interesting, spoke about their partnership. And, one of the things, that I thought was interesting on the Ralph Lauren side was that David Lauren spoke about, obviously start with your vision and have the technology support that. So tech for the sake of tech is just like a no-no, right? It's really about how do you have the tech support you? And he talked about how Ralph Lauren is the first luxury brand to sell on the internet. They were thinking about AI a few years ago, really at the forefront with this Microsoft partnership. And they launched their Ask Ralph AI. That's their new stylist Gen AI tool to help you put together outfits, which is one of their kind of hallmarks of putting outfits together. And so I thought just overall the session was inspiring. And the woman from Microsoft also shared 5 key learnings, which I thought were good. And I tried to write as quickly as possible to capture what she said. But these are the 5 learnings from Microsoft. Her first is that AI transformation is business transformation. The second is AI is only as good as the data over which it reasons, which I know we talk about all the time, Barry. The third is you need a culture, and she kept saying culture for innovation for tech. Like that has to really be embedded in your organization to be successful. The fourth learning was all around the responsible nature of AI, which is really critical. And then the last was pick your partners wisely. So make sure both parties have each other's best interests in mind. And that's certainly the case with Ralph Lauren and Microsoft. So I found that to be a really interesting session.
Yeah, great recap. One thing we talked about at the Retail Rethink conference was Ralph Lauren and what they've done with their Gen AI fashion, essentially assistant, is that's a really good example of how you drive consumers past the AI agent, like the human, to your site. Because there were several retailers that presented at NRF that categorically stated, we have less traffic. Well, why do we have less traffic? There's something called large language models. But, this apparel player, they have done something really unique, really differentiating for the human consumer on their site to help you with your clothes and your style. And that's kind of a nod to the future. If you don't really have something special in terms of why a human needs to go to your site, the agent's going to handle all that. So I just thought they were ahead of it. That was a big talking point at the Retail Rethink event.
Yeah, very, very cool. And Shelley Branston, that's who it was from Microsoft that was talking with David Lauren. So really, really cool session. And that will be part of our recap too when we put our deck out in a few days. So yeah.
Love it.
All right, everyone. Well, Barry, we just came back from NRF, and we have a couple of our colleagues on the phone. Dave Marcotte and Amar Singh joining us today. Happy New Year to our audience. This is our first podcast for 2026. I'm so excited to kick off with some of the insights and learnings that we took away from the National Retail Federation Conference, which just completed at the Javits Center, and we just returned. So we're excited to be able to share out some of those big picture viewpoints, and wanted to kick it over first to Dave and Amar. I know you both are experts on the ground floor of the show expo itself and all of the new technologies that we're seeing come out in retail, and would love to hear kind of a big picture. Just first, what you thought, what you thought the vibes of the show were this year, anything surprising, and anything that really stood out to you as some key observations. Dave, maybe you
I
first.
think if I had a summary statement, it would be that I saw less brand new solutions. I saw an awful lot of expansion into innovation, of taking additional capabilities and expanding them further. So having an RFID tag, but expands into a price tag, expands into a warehouse tag, expands into loss security. You saw this, this broadening, which is perfectly normal in the industry, which is how do I grab more space without having to spend too much more money? So that was the first thing I saw. The second thing being there was some interesting new tech coming out of offshore, particularly from Israel, and China had come in with some brand new vendors as well. So that was new, and that was worth taking in as we were going about.
Absolutely. No, I'll agree with that. And I'm going to add that there are two things really stood out. The first is that data is king and trust is the currency in the age of AI. With that, I mean, we see the single source of truth executions, just like Dave said, all the big tech vendors, they're unleashing their solutions where they're tying in different disparate data points with the protocol. And at the show, Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Google, he launched and introduced really the universal commerce protocol in which you can have different data sets all combined into the Google network. So that's there were several examples of that throughout the show where you're bringing in different data points, whether it's loyalty, merchandising data, inventory data, ERP data sets, and bring them all together into one single source of truth, and then allowing marketers to run campaigns based on that. So it was that. And then the trust was a big thing, given that there's so many technologies out there. They're doing facial recognition. They're tracking inventory data. They're tracking shopper behavior and their purchasing patterns. And sometimes it feels like the new technology that's on the floor is really intrusive. You feel like you're being surveilled. And I think that's the fine balance that marketers and brands and retailers have to fine tune so it doesn't come off as too creepy, but as more of inspiring journeys and helping shoppers find relevancy in their trips.
I was going to say it was a major insertion of Israeli companies came, and that's when you saw it bluntly. In that, I'm not quite sure how to put it, other than most of their technology is coming off of military research and then expanding into the civilian. If I was going past a facial recognition screen elsewhere in the show, it would show me as being male, somewhere over 60. When I went through the Israeli section, it named my name, it named my children, it named where they lived. It was a whole, that capability is there elsewhere, but the limitation to it was not present. So there's a learning curve that will have to occur in terms of how to work.
Yeah, I remember, Amar and you and I were standing next to one of the Israeli tech companies that did exactly what Dave was saying, really showcasing like who you are.
One that really stood out was one that it was, it said, we can scrape data sites that are blocking you. And I'm going, okay, not a good thing, but to them, it was just one more thing to put out there. So there is a learning curve. I saw that 10 years ago with the Chinese started showing up in large numbers. They had to get to a different perspective in terms of where the market is versus what their capabilities were.
Yeah, and overall, Rachel, you talked about the vibe of the show. I think it was buzzing. It was 45,000 plus people coming in and around. Uh, I thought many attendees were up at the sessions where there were a lot of stages on during the show, and they were all listening and they were tuned in. But there were several people on the floor as well. And again, I agree with what Dave said with the companies from France, Israel, and China. I find that Israel has some of the best innovation, but Dave's also mentioned that in the past, the scale is somewhat an issue unless they get acquired or they become part of a bigger ecosystem. I feel the French were more, focused on marketing tech, whereas the Chinese, they brought more cost effectiveness to the solutions where you find, the good innovation, strong innovation, but at a lower price point compared to some of the bigger players on the floor.
Yeah, really interesting. I found the same. It's been maybe my 5th year in person at NRF, something like that. And I felt like this was the busiest, most buzzing, tons of people. One of the biggest shows that I've been at, for sure.
Yeah, it has become so large that the company is considering how do they split it apart. With 45,000 people in one place, it's pandemonium in many ways. Unless it's like we were saying before, unless you split it up, you have a larger team going in and get yourself focused, you're going to be lost. So yes, it's very much that. But the other side is I didn't see very much what I would refer to as boredom. I didn't see anybody that was just sitting there with a placard up going, come and visit me. I didn't see very much of that. Everybody had something to talk about, and that was pretty good.
Well, Barry and I
was going to say, I even saw the FAA there at their own booth talking about air cargo and air cargo safety and conditions. And you went, to you that's a niche. If you're in supply chain, that's kind of like a big deal.
Yeah, for sure.
But he was one guy sitting in the very back of the floor, but he always had somebody in front of that booth. So that was a good example of it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Barry and I, we were heavy up on the insight sessions. There were a ton of really fantastic sessions. We had our whole team this year at NRF, so we really tried to divide and conquer. Barry, I don't know what were some of your big takeaways from the show this year?
Yeah, I mean, like trying to be strategic for a moment. Definitely bigger audiences seem to be more of a Latin America uptick. I think Dave is right. It's now to the point where it's definitely overwhelming. I think it's a good problem to have. They have more attendees than really the space can handle. I mean, 2 Starbucks, 40,000 humans. That's never really going to work out well. So I do think they have to kind of relook executionally. I heard this side conversations like we love NRF. The problem is it's too big, and how do they execute it so it's a little more accommodating to 40 almost 45,000 people. And lastly, someone who covers data, AI, and automation daily, like many of us, I was surprised to see, at least I attend to all the big sessions, the learning sessions. I would say 80% of those sessions were all focused on data, AI, certainly agentic commerce. I would have thought it would have been closer to 50 maybe, but for sure, I think one reason for that is there's real progress. Like all of these examples I saw, they weren't like, here's what's next. Yeah, there was a bit of that, but it was around execution, sharing results. I mean, it's really happening in different ways across retailers, across brands. If you're not moving or have data AI as a part of your operating model, and you're moving, towards being a frontier firm, it's going to be painful. And all of this was coming through with technology partners. Walmart and Google's a good example. Every time you saw the retailer, or every time you saw the FMCG, it was with a technology partner. So I just think the partnerships play a key role here, and it's about execution. We're seeing real results now from AI shopping, no question about it.
Yeah, to your point, Barry, one of my favorite sessions, and I know we'll talk about what our favorite sessions are and things that we saw, but one of my favorite sessions was the session that was with, it was about the Ralph Lauren Corporation and their partnership with Microsoft. So again, the brand, the retailer, and tech partner on stage together. And I found that session so insightful because they talked to the fact that they have a 25-year partnership between Ralph Lauren and Microsoft, that they were the first luxury brand to sell on the internet, which is actually pretty cool. And they really are attuned to the idea of how do you bring kind of the life and richness of real life online. And they were much earlier to do that. They were also the first brand to do QR codes, connecting the dots between in-store and online. They started with the conversation around AI and generative AI before many others did. They launched their Ask Ralph AI. So really, I was pretty jazzed about that because Ralph Lauren is such a traditional, really based on heritage brand, but they are pretty far advanced with that partnership with Microsoft and what they're doing from a tech standpoint.
No question.
That's a good example of when you can get something being said by a retailer and nobody does a fact check. Everything you just described, I did with Tiffany 20 years ago. So I'm not quite sure they were the first one out there with a luxury or how they're describing that. There are other aspects of the business we're not used to looking at. The reality to understand is, of course, when you get up on the floor, you need to establish your credentials immediately, and that's a good way of doing it. We were the first. We got there. I'd be more than happy to share you the data from Tiffany's that we built that long ago in terms of all the capabilities you just described.
Yeah, so many of these brands that we're seeing that we saw at NRF they're pretty far ahead with what they're doing technologically and preparing for the future. That looks like agentic commerce. So that was really an overriding theme as well.
Yeah, no, I felt like agentic commerce and AI was all over in the sessions. Everyone was talking about that, but we're still seeing some executions on the floor. I think next year we can expect more of that to come in. As Barry and I were talking about it at the show, I think, Barry, you mentioned Lowe's talked about it with the marketplace execution, bringing AI. That's such a great example. I think a lot of that is still in experimentation. There's still a lot of regulatory regulatory requirements and everything is going to be looked out at. And I was speaking with a pair company there where they were talking about the payment platform there. They were talking about reverse payments where someone refunds or returns a product. And if it's bought through an agent, then we don't have any laws or regulations around that because the return is often is made back to the actual human shopper. But if an agent's buying, then how you return it back. So I think there's still a lot of regulatory implications that we're still going to see in the next coming future. But that said, the future is exciting. There's a lot of automation happening at the back end. And now it's tying to the front end with the shopper making and really shopper delegating those decisions to the to agentic AI models to do shopping for them. So that was a big takeaway for me as well from this. And I feel the integration of different loyalty programs and the user data, algorithms, the predictive analysis, they're all unleashing new avenues for shoppers to consider as they go on their shopping journeys and bring more ideas and simplifying their shopping, as we've seen that Help Me Buy capability with Amazon. So there are tons happening in this space.
Any other big learning moments that you want to?
Well, I actually had a real-time moment in regards to Lowe's, and that I got a note coming down and saw the video of the CTO for Lowe's talking about agentic AI. When I was standing in the Zebra booth watching the Lowe's team demonstrate how they were doing a new pro solution in real time in terms of how to deal with pro painters. Now, that for many people, you may not understand the industry. That's a major issue in home improvement, which is how do I get this exact same shade, the exact time, and everything else. A very industrial looking solution that was based on Gen AI in part and other parts in terms of machine learning. When I was looking at it, we were taking apart. I was actually in the midst of a group from Walmart looking for the same solutions. So there was a very different approach to it when you got into different levels of a company in terms of how they were approaching the discussion.
I would build on that. I think you're right, Dave. Really interesting. Just two key points about Lowe's, and Joe Cano there did a great job overviewing what's happening. One, the business model there has changed, and they are leading, by the way. that industry with their 3P marketplace. It was astounding to hear the success they're having and selling so many very high end items they don't have room for in their 1P market. Very successful. They're capturing a new consumer like they've never had before. I mean, just profound. And then says, well, you get to sell retail media. So this has been a game changer for them. And just the second point, which I thought was just really, I just really appreciated Joe saying, look, our website, it has fewer visitors. And there's something called, models and the agentic layer. And we know we have to be visible up here to, really the kind of really the system of record. That's a new term. Don't want to talk about it too long here. Amar, you kicked it off. There's the merchant of record, and you like that as a retailer, and there's benefits with that. But maybe what's more important is the system of record. I'm going to be writing about this a bit, and that's what Google really announced with Walmart. And Joe really understands it. We have to be in the system of record, and because this is where brand visibility is happening. I just felt like of all the retailers there, you probably didn't expect Lowe's to be so AI centric, but wow, they really are.
Yeah, that's interesting because, Amar and I have covered home improvement for the last, 12 years. And one of the things we say is it's not exactly a secret to us. Home improvement tends to be on the edge of all retailers in regards to technology. So if let's say you have a door that breaks, you can take the part, show it up to a camera. They will tell you exactly in the store nearest to you how many feet to go into aisle 4. Look to the left, it's on the 3rd row down. The integration of inventory then goes into, do you want it delivered to your home? Do you want an alternative, which takes you out to the marketplace? The intensity of the competition between Home Depot and Lowe's has created that environment that's actually quite singular versus other channels. And I often tell people, if you look at what home improvement's doing, you may get a better look at what's happening in the next 2 years.
So one of the other things that I took away from the show, and also this was something I think that was a build on what we heard last year as well at the 2025 show, but this whole space that we also cover around social commerce, the building of communities, the importance of influencers on really driving sales. And one of another favorite session of mine was the session that was moderated by Jill Manoff, who's the editor-in-chief of Glossy and Modern Retail. And on the panel were Sarah Henry from Walmart, Ashley Shapiro from American Eagle, and Noah Gonzalez from H&M. And they really talked a lot about just their creator content, how it often outperforms traditional marketing, really that discovery on many of their social channels and through influencers is directly driving sales, and talked also about the importance of allowing influencers to have their own voice, to be authentic, to not have too much prescription ahead of time. And they're really bringing in their influencers as part of their business. Noah from H&M talked about their ambassador program, which is an always-on program. Sarah at Walmart talked about widening their aperture at Walmart, even building communities beyond like what we traditionally see in social media, on Meta or TikTok. They're looking at things like Substack and Reddit. So there's a lot of this conversation around the importance of continuing to, cultivate the creator community and influencers, and how important that is for brands to drive overall business.
And just to add to that, Rachel, I think this is super important. This is an area that, well, I'm particularly doing a lot of work this year in, is the generative engine optimization and all the things you talked about, social media influencers, how your brand is shown on the page. The PDPs are changing. The product display pages, they're going to be more descriptive than just emotional. For instance, like if you just think, oh, the refreshing beverage, an agent doesn't know what that means. It needs to be told it's refreshing because it's more citrus and there's less sugar, more protein, prebiotics, whatever. That's how it's going to rank products in a search. And it's not only looking at the PDPs, it's also looking into Reddit comments, it's looking into Discord, it's looking into social media influencers. And there's a singularity, a uniformity of messaging is important. So if you have a harmonious marketing campaign running across all the touch points, you're more likely to be shown by an agent as a recommendation to the end user. So these things are getting super important. They're just not good to haves or differentiators. They're becoming increasingly quickly table stakes that each brand must have in its asset box. So that's the future where the agents are going to go.
Yeah, something I was saying more of in a more deep and broad fashion with synthetic data. So this came out of, again, one of the things you don't see quite at the show until you talk to people is OEMs, is companies that make software for other companies. And Yi, which is a Chinese company, does an extremely good job of synthetic data for visual and also predictive data. So great stuff. But what made it more interesting is that this is technology that's been used for visual point of sale. So something you put down on the table, you can see it and then go. What you don't realize is you need at least 700 images for that to work. Well, you have 20 images you do physically, and the rest of them are generated by synthetic processes and such. You've seen this move into loss prevention, which is kind of interesting in that saying, okay, I can see somebody doing something. Synthetic data allows me to start projecting what they're doing in the background. And this particularly has been a LBT, which is a company, most of you know what it is, but you would never know the number. So if you go in a parking lot and you see a 20-foot tall tower with flashing lights and everything else, that's LBT, an incredibly successful company. They're increasingly using synthetic data to incorporate body cam and also other cameras and also other things to create a new predictive modeling for looking at where things are going and how they're happening. So you're seeing, again, that broadening out into new areas for existing companies based on what is existing processes, but taking them up the next level.
Yeah, and Dave, I believe you and I were at standing at that booth together, and there was a lot across the show that I saw as well that were technologies to help retailers prevent just crime, and I believe that was
I showed you a different one, and I probably didn't. I should have done it a little bit more. The company I was showing you is one that specializes in counting money. They put money in there, put coins in there, and then put it in a secure place. What they did is they took that, added it to a point of sale system so that you could use cash in a convenience store, a gas station, liquor store, right?
Yes,
and
yes.
places where you have a high risk, but be able to do that and be able to take the money and place it into a high security environment immediately. So that was the other type of thing is see, very older companies doing something that frankly most of us find boring and expanding it rapidly into places where there's a niche that has to be filled.
The other thing I saw, I think a couple of us might have been in the session with PepsiCo and AWS, but PepsiCo is really at the forefront of pushing the envelope on technology with digital twins, with autonomous delivery, with more advancements around robotics. So I think some of that we're seeing, brands like PepsiCo getting behind these advanced technologies quickly as they're moving so fast, and that will certainly put them ahead.
Oh yeah, robots were everywhere really. We saw them. There's some executions for the back end of the store, and then the interesting, Dave and I both talked about this another company that's doing robotic deliveries with their cars. It's like Waymo, just for delivery, which also was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing for me that was probably boring to other people was the use of of relatively small floor robots, so being say 12 by 12 inches tall, being able to plug and play into other fixtures. So, example, you would have 2 or 3 of these. You would charge them, and then one of them could plug itself into a shelf that would take things out to the aisles. Another one could put itself into a bin that would take groceries out into the parking lot. Another one would. So you're using a common robot and a common set of software to drive the robot, but with 8 other fixtures. And I think the best way to put it is so simple. I think I should have thought of it. Nobody's ever thought about doing that with robotics. Is essentially plug and play. And that was very interesting. The regular blade, 6 foot tall, 7 foot tall towers that go through, there's been a lot of evolution there to make them either thinner or such. But you still have the issue about insurance liabilities. You can't put them in the aisle on anything that's going to tip over. So you always have to deal with that 2-foot, 200-pound base. You still have to deal with a lot of those realities. And then the last thing I saw that I thought, I saw my first dog slash four-legged robot that I thought would work in retail. And I thought that was fascinating to watch. What I think was really cool was when you turned it off, it would collapse down all the way down into a 6-foot by 12 inches by 18-inch block with a handle on the top. So you could pick up the robot, take it someplace else, put it down, and then at which point it would come up. But it also showed the key issue with robots, which is how do they communicate? And you probably, ideally speaking, you want them to communicate non-verbally. So that robot communicated like a dog, which human beings respond to immediately. Interesting enough, the towers also do the same thing. If you talk to the tower, it actually starts responding to you with motions and stuff. So there's a whole field of robotics that you're starting to see come out into the open in terms of moving away from it's new and interesting to I have to embed it into something that's practical. And that was very exciting at the show.
Very cool. Any learnings from side conversations that might not have been visible in any of the show sessions or on the floor, but anything else that you want to talk about that stood out to you about NRF?
I'll go first, Rachel. Just boy, I heard so many FMCGs just ask about the big three. I mean, that's now kind of a universal term that just means, Amazon, Walmart, and Costco. How does this apply to the big three? It was just, we kind of knew that, but it's just so much of commerce is centered on those three players. I think like you, others that I talked to thought that social media, social commerce is so important to any brand or retailer. It's kind of missing in the conversation. It could have been more, profound, let's say, versus a bit of the AI. And then many of us thought we should have been learning more about emerging platforms like, Whatnot and others. What are these new, emerging retailers, emerging CPG brands, emerging digital commerce platforms? There was a bit of that, but I think, all of that was kind of overshadowed by the Walmart, and Google News. That was just so important. And the last thing I would just mention is, brand AI visibility just really matters. I mean, you just have to understand where you are kind of in or out with, these agents that are crawling and deciding if you're if you're going to be part of the conversation. Lastly, I thought Jason Goldberg, and some of us were talking about his presentation, he did a really good job of just framing out too much of the time when we say agentic commerce, we kind of get caught up in the checkout. And maybe, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The bottom, 90% of this iceberg is discoverability and how you're being compared. And that's the bigger topic here, not the checkout. That's to come, multi-checkout, et cetera. So those were just a few of the conversations I was kind of listening in on.
Yeah, I agree with you, Barry. We sat in and listened to Jason as well. And that idea, it's everything. It's all of the purchase behaviors. It's the entire shopping journey that is part of like where the wave is heading with agentic commerce, because consumers are tapping into these technologies at rapid rates. And so I thought that was interesting too. Just the way you define agentic commerce is really important.
I thought the enabling of the employee was the part that I got into some conversations with key players in that part of the world. And a good example of that was AS Reader, a company I've never heard of before. It's been around, but it was the first time in the show. They had a glove that would fit on the hand. The glove underneath had a very thin layer that could read an RFID or a symbol about an inch away. So you could glide your hand over the product, get your information, would show up either verbally or on your machine. On the back of your glove was another reader that could read up to 8 feet away. And then you had an extension that you could easily do that could read 40 feet away. And you're going, all of a sudden, I'm now getting into the various levels of use for RFID that I've been trying to do for 20 years. But what they're really doing is using a very simple, garment, if you wish, that allows the employee to be able to expand outward. So they were using the case study, if they've done it with a jewelry store, where you could bring jewelry out, put it on the counter, And then if somebody decides to steal it, which unfortunately does happen, you could actually track it for up to 40 or 50 feet away before it actually got out of your sight. There were some things like that that are kind of mundane, but also becoming very, very real and very everyday. And that was the part of the conversation that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I was completely blown away by the integration of RFID. Well, we've seen the RFID for a long period of time, but the way Amazon's partnering with you know with different label makers to enable frictionless checkout is just profound. So we saw the AWS platform for quick checkout where you don't have to scan anything. You just completely walk out, and the RFID scanners are going to do all the calculations for you, and then prompt that payment method. We saw use cases of where shoppers can get feedback using QR codes and NPCs. So there's a company out there was in the innovation platform where it's using RFID tags and NFC tags on the plane. So you can just simply scan that with your phone and tap it next to it. And it's going to prompt if you want to give any feedback on it was a United Airlines seat, then you can simply do a voice recording message. You can do a voice recording and then send it. And on the back end, it's going to be transcribed, and the keyword search is going to be generated on the client's platform, and they'll know what the actual issue was, and they can aggregate that to see if there's a pattern of those grievances coming from their consumer. So I found those implications are pretty profound.
So, Rachel, I took you to the Hand Show booth.
Yes.
And that, to me, I've been watching Hand Show now for the last 6 or 7 years. It's a Chinese company. They specialize in very high-level LED pads, but they've increasingly moved into e-paper. Now, e-paper is a Xerox invention from 25 years ago that they never knew what to do with. And essentially, you can create, what they've done is been able to take e-paper that's a very cheap medium and has a very, very low power usage and expand it now into LED use. So you can have an LED tag that's, say, a square inch and you can read it, or you can have one that's 24 inches square. They can do all those things and then make it so the entire store environment suddenly comes alive with bright colors, and the clarity is just unbelievable. And that was another leap forward that was interesting to watch.
Yeah, agree. I mean, imagine as retailers are continuing to create more experiential areas in their brick and mortar stores, just having it come to life more. That's definitely one way to get there for sure. All right, so just to finish us up, anything else that you'd like to share about NRF? Anything surprising that you didn't see a lot of at NRF, or any other last comments or thoughts before we end our conversation? And Amar, let me kick it to you first.
I think one of the most interesting things that I saw this year at the show was the usage of vending machines. So you have vending robots now. It's like within the vending machine, you see a robot picking orders from different sides of the machine and just building the basket. And there's another vending machine that would just get an ice cream or a cotton candy out for you based on the different flavors and patterns that you selected. So that was pretty cool. It just adds to the convenience and fun part of retail. If you're in convenience stores or even at fairs and shows, you just have the capability to just add to that experience. I think that was good. The one thing that I didn't see much of was the new innovation in the space where you'll see just cutting edge technology. I felt like it was more duplicative. It was many solutions it was very repetitive. They all are basically offering the same solution with just agents added to their platforms. I thought, I was looking forward to something that's different than what we saw last year. But again, there were some cool innovations around robotics and RFID use cases that kind of stood out for me.
Dave, what about you?
I think if I was going to note one thing, and it's worth noting, the Chinese still came. There's been a lot of negative feeling about Chinese in the United States. There's been a lot of pushback, a lot of tariffs and whatnot. More of them showed up this year, not less. And so you can see the Chinese industry is really continuing to push in with very innovative solutions. And again, very cost-effective, innovative solutions. One of the quieter, smaller booths I saw was Alibaba Global. which openly said, if you're going to do business with China, you need to talk to us because AWS doesn't work in China. We do. So you saw this new confidence that was probably lacking 2 years ago, and it's going to be there for a while.
Rachel, I would say
Gary?
for me, I'm a big fan of Gary Vee. That session was kind of standing room only. I mean, he's one of the top marketing voices in the world. And one soundbite he gave I thought was fantastic for certainly large brands, medium, small brands, and then just your personal brand. And he talked a lot about how attention is the new economy, and that's kind of the new currency. And he talked a lot about, hey, figure out where underpriced attention is and learn how to effectively storytell in those places. So simple, but man, that's impactful. And I think that applies to any brand. And I was so glad I attended that session. That'll be included, quick plug, in our NRF recap, right, Rachel?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And I remember Gary too. I mean, he's one to definitely break the mold, and something that stood out to me. Well, he pushed also, it's all about views achieved. That should be your number one measurement metric, to your point, Barry. But the other thing he also talked about is how marketing and creative should be linked to short-term sales. So this idea of, which is retail media's sweet spot. I would say there wasn't as much on retail media this year as I thought there might be. There was a session dedicated to that. And of course, there's a lot of implications with agentic AI and retail media. But what Gary said, made me think a lot about how retail media is really at that intersection between marketing and sales and how they're becoming much closer together. But I'll leave everyone as well with one last thing. Is there were a number of sessions where there were CEOs talking about just big picture leadership lessons and how to be very strategic with your business. And there were a couple of those. One that stood out to me was the opening session with Ed Stack from Dick's Sporting Goods. And he talked about, basically when they went to look at what's the future store of the future, what they did at Dick's was, what he said is, they built a concept that will kill Dick's Sporting Goods. So not being afraid to completely, start over with something that could take you to that next gen, which for them is that house of sport experience. So that really stood out to me as well. But with that, this has been an awesome conversation, and thank you all, particularly to Dave and Amar for joining Barry and I in our podcast and rehashing some of our key takeaways from NRF. Really appreciate you all being here. Thank you.
Good job, team.
Good day.
All right, Barry. Well, loved having Dave and Amar on for a great discussion on all things NRF. And again, thank you to the NRF for including us as part of the conference this year. We just all got so much out of it. And here are our top 5 learnings. We have so many more learnings to share, but these are 5 of them for our audience. And number 1 is that retailers are rapidly evolving from channels into AI platforms. So integrating data, media, fulfillment, decision-making, everything. So the opportunity now shifts to influencing this intelligence and interface layers where AI increasingly shapes discovery and choice and execution, which goes, far beyond just traditional shelf and traditional digital touch points. And then number 2, agentic commerce represents a true step function shift in retail. So shopping is moving from search and choice to intent and action. AI agents are reducing friction. They're helping to narrow overwhelming assortments. They're helping to guide shopper decisions. And commerce is becoming conversational, predictive, and more outcome-driven rather than just transactional.
And number 3, Rachel, was moving to how more of us are going to move to frontier firms. And this was, led by Microsoft. This was a session I attended at the Retail Rethink event, but that was also, they covered that at the actual large, auditorium. I've written about this. We've created PowerPoint decks. I think the headline is, these agents are going to be creating insights. They're going to help us execute decisions. They're going to optimize so much of our work. And you just want to be aware of this. And if you can, start building your own agents. This is, you can do this as part of your CRM, your sort of existing operating system. For many, that might be Microsoft, and then that would be, the Copilot. And Copilot, is in the early stages of having users build agents to help with research, to help with so much. And, many of us at Kantar are using these daily, and they're saving us work. And so the more we can become proficient in working with and creating our own agents, the better, for sure. Number 4, I was so impressed with Lowe's. Oh my gosh, they're leading the marketplace in that specific industry, home improvement. Their retail media data capture is a real growth engine. And it's a business model change. And they just talked about how they're moving with speed, how they're partnering with the sellers, they're listening to the sellers. And that marketplace is really helping their margins, not just the retail media, but they're selling so many 3P high-end home, furnishings, high-end sinks that they could never sell, from the store. It is such a game changer for them. And in the context of agentic AI, there's a lot of reasons why you even want a more prolific, 3P marketplace. Just knuckle bump to Lowe's. Just so impressed with them. And then the Walmart technology leader during that session made clear that really digital is no longer a channel for them. That's kind of an outdated, perspective. It's the core operating model along, with AI. And so now AI, obviously with digital is now orchestrating so much, merchandising, supply chain decisions, media, stores across so many areas, the next best action, associates just look at that app. What's the next best action based on so much data around the store, the shopper, the weather, et cetera? What can I do now? I'm not waiting on the store manager or my department manager. The app is telling me based on more data than we can even comprehend. It's such a more predictive, cognitive enhanced way of working, and Walmart is leading that in the physical store, and then obviously across e-commerce and really their entire omni-channel business model. So Walmart by far was way in ahead of really all the retailers I saw. Rachel, certainly Amazon is doing amazing work, but it just seemed Walmart had more presence at the show. So subsequently, you would just naturally think, man, they're just doing a great job everywhere.
Awesome. Yes, agree, Barry. And that does bring us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much. This has been a great NRF season. Thank you to Dave and to Amar for joining our discussion today. And to our audience, we hope you enjoyed our show. And as always, thanks for listening to the Kantar Retail Soundbites podcast.
And if you would, please rate and review us on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you're listening. You can always reach out to Rachel and I on LinkedIn if you want us to follow up on something. Your reviews really matter. So this year, if you see value in this, please do that. And just want to really thank especially Victoria for producing and marketing the podcast. Without her, you don't really hear us. So we're just grateful for her. And with that, we'll see you in 2 weeks.